In the early decades of the 18th century, a singular experiment in human freedom took root on a small island in the Bahamas. It was neither planned nor authorized. It emerged from chaos, desperation, and the dreams of men who had nothing left to lose. Nassau. For nearly a decade, this harbor town became something the world had never seen before and would never see again. A republic ruled by pirates, a democracy of outlaws, a place where kings held no power and every man had a voice. It was a fragile utopia built on stolen gold, and the British Empire would stop at nothing to destroy it. The island of New Providence had been known to European sailors since the early days of Caribbean exploration. The Spanish charted it, the English claimed it, but for most of the 17th century, nobody truly controlled it. The harbor was exceptional, protected by a shallow sandbar that kept large warships at bay, yet deep enough inside for merchant vessels and swift sloops to anchor safely. It was nature's perfect fortress. The settlement that would become Nassau was founded in the 1650s, named Charlestown after the English king. For decades, it existed as a quiet colonial outpost. Merchants traded, planters grew cotton, governors sent reports back to London. But the Caribbean was never truly at peace. In 1703, during the War of Spanish Succession, a combined French and Spanish fleet attacked the settlement. They burned it to the ground. The governor fled. Settlers scattered to other islands or died defending their homes. When the smoke cleared, Charlestown was nothing but ash and abandoned foundations. And into this vacuum, the pirates came. They arrived gradually at first, ships seeking refuge from storms, crews looking for fresh water and a place to repair damaged hulls, men fleeing the noose in Port Royal or Havana. What they found was paradise. An empty harbor with no customs officers, no magistrates, no soldiers. The sandbar kept Royal Navy frigates away, but pirate sloops could slip in and out with ease. Freshwater springs bubbled on the island. Fish filled the surrounding waters, and the ruins of Charlestown offered shelter from the sun and rain. By 1715, word had spread across the Caribbean. Nassau was free. One sailor wrote, "Here a man might anchor without fear of the law, spend his plunder as he pleased, and answer to no authority but his own." They came by the hundreds. Benjamin Hornigold, Charles Vane, Jack Rackham, who would be called Calico Jack, Edward Teach, who would become Blackbeard. And with them came something unexpected, not just a pirate haven, but the seeds of a republic. Imagine Nassau in those early years, ruined buildings slowly being rebuilt with salvaged timber and stolen materials, tents pitched along the beach, cooking fires burning at night while crews shared rum and stories. But this was no lawless chaos. The pirates of Nassau lived by codes far stricter than many might imagine. These were men who had served on merchant ships and naval vessels. They knew how brutal captains could be, how powerless common sailors were against tyranny. And so they created something different. On pirate ships, captains were elected by the crew. They could be voted out just as easily. Plunder was divided according to written articles that every man signed. The quartermaster held as much power as the captain, serving as the crew's representative. Decisions were made democratically. Each man had one vote. It was a radical idea. In an age when kings ruled by divine right and common people had no voice, pirates created floating democracies. And in Nassau, they attempted to build one on land. Benjamin Hornigold emerged as one of the settlement's early leaders, a veteran privateer who had turned to piracy when the War of Spanish Succession ended and legal plundering disappeared. Hornigold understood both seamanship and politics. Under his influence, Nassau began to organize itself. Pirate crews pooled resources to repair fortifications. They established lookout posts to warn of approaching warships. They even created a primitive court to settle disputes between crews. There was no king here, no governor appointed by London, just men governing themselves. By 1716, Nassau's population had swelled to over 1,000 pirates, along with merchants, former slaves, prostitutes, and refugees from across the Caribbean. The harbor bristled with ships. Sloops, brigantines, and captured merchant vessels swayed at anchor. The settlement had become the epicenter of Caribbean piracy, and the British Empire was terrified. Every ship that flew the black flag from Nassau was a direct challenge to royal authority. Pirates didn't just steal cargo, they attacked the very foundations of empire: trade, control, hierarchy. Colonial governors from Jamaica to the Carolinas sent desperate letters to London. Merchant companies demanded action. Insurance rates for Caribbean shipping soared. Something had to be done about Nassau. But taking the pirate republic would not be easy. In those years, Nassau truly was ungovernable. The sandbar made naval assault nearly impossible. Any attempt to land soldiers would be met with hundreds of armed pirates who knew every inch of the island. And the pirates had allies. Merchants in colonial ports quietly traded with them, buying stolen goods at bargain prices. Corrupt officials accepted bribes to look the other way. Even some ship captains preferred paying pirates a small tax rather than fighting them. The Republic thrived on this network of corruption and pragmatism. Life in Nassau followed its own rhythm. Ships departed on cruises hunting for prizes. Weeks or months later, they returned with holds full of plunder: silver pieces of 8, bolts of silk, barrels of wine, enslaved people seized from captured slavers. The spoils were divided on the beach according to ships' articles. Then the spending began. Taverns filled with men drinking themselves senseless. Gambling houses ran day and night. Prostitutes did brisk business. One account claimed a man might earn £1,000 on a single voyage and lose it all within a week. But Nassau was more than debauchery. Skilled craftsmen set up shops: carpenters, sailmakers, blacksmiths. They traded their services for shares of plunder. A small economy emerged, primitive but functional. Women, too, found freedom here. Anne Bonny and Mary Read, the most famous female pirates in history, both sailed from Nassau. In a world that offered women few choices, the pirate republic represented possibility. And former slaves found something they could find nowhere else in the Caribbean. Pirate crews were among the most racially integrated communities of the era. Black sailors served alongside white ones, with equal shares and equal votes. It was far from perfect. Nassau had its share of violence, abuse, and exploitation, but compared to the rigid hierarchies of colonial society, it offered something revolutionary: the possibility that a man's worth was determined by his actions, not his birth. This was what made Nassau so dangerous to the empire. Not just the stolen ships, but the idea behind them. The idea that common people could govern themselves. In London, King George I and his advisors debated how to end the pirate republic. Military invasion remained risky and expensive, but there was another option: amnesty. In September 1717, the king issued a royal proclamation. Any pirate who surrendered by September 1718 would receive a full pardon for all past crimes. They could start new lives as free men. It was a calculated gamble. If the pirates accepted, the Republic would collapse from within. If they refused, Britain would have justification for military action. To deliver this offer, they needed the right man. Someone the pirates might trust, but who was loyal to the crown. They chose Woodes Rogers.
Rogers was a former privateer himself, a man who had circumnavigated the globe and rescued Alexander Selkirk, the real-life inspiration for Robinson Crusoe. He was tough, experienced, and crucially, he understood the pirate mindset. In July 1718, Rogers sailed into Nassau Harbor with a fleet of warships and a royal commission as governor. The pirates faced an impossible choice. Some, like Benjamin Hornigold, accepted the pardon immediately. Hornigold had always walked the line between pirate and privateer. He saw which way the wind was blowing and chose survival. Others hesitated. Could they trust the king's word? Would they truly be free, or was this a trap? Charles Vane refused outright. As Rogers' fleet entered the harbor, Vane loaded a captured French ship with explosives and set it aflame, sending the fire ship toward the British vessels. Then he sailed out past the confused warships, black flag flying, and escaped to sea. It was a dramatic gesture, a declaration that some pirates would never submit. But most chose differently. Over the following weeks, hundreds of pirates accepted the king's pardon. They signed their names or made their marks on official documents. They surrendered their weapons and their ships. The Republic was dying. Rogers moved quickly to ensure it stayed dead. He appointed former pirates like Hornigold as pirate hunters, sending them after their former comrades. He rebuilt Fort Nassau and garrisoned it with soldiers. He established courts, imposed laws, and made it clear that the age of pirate self-rule was over. Those who had accepted the pardon found themselves in an estranged position. They were free men, legally pardoned, but what could they do? Most knew only the sea. Legitimate merchant ships wouldn't hire known pirates. Some turned to farming or fishing. Others drank away their pardons in Nassau's remaining taverns. And some, inevitably, returned to piracy. This gave Rogers the justification he needed. When pirates broke their pardons and returned to crime, Rogers showed no mercy. Trials were swift, sentences were death. In December 1718, 8 pirates were hanged in Nassau. Their bodies were left dangling from gallows near the harbor as a warning to others. Among those who refused the pardon, the most famous was Edward Teach, Blackbeard. He had sailed from Nassau for North Carolina, where he established a new base and continued raiding. But in November 1718, Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy cornered him in a brutal boarding action. Blackbeard died fighting, his body bearing 5 gunshot wounds and more than 20 sword cuts. When news of his death reached Nassau, it sent a clear message. The age of pirate freedom was ending. Charles Vane continued to resist until his ship wrecked in a hurricane. He survived, only to be recognized, captured, and hanged in Port Royal in 2020. Calico Jack Rockham was caught in Jamaica. He too went to the gallows, along with his crew. Anne Bonny and Mary Read were spared execution because they were pregnant, though Read died in prison. One by one, the pirates of Nassau were hunted down, pardoned, or killed. By 1725, Caribbean piracy was effectively destroyed. The Royal Navy patrolled shipping lanes with impunity. Colonial governors reported that the seas were safer than they had been in decades. Nassau transformed into a respectable colonial town. Churches replaced gambling houses. Merchants traded legally. The population grew, but in orderly fashion, under the watchful eye of British authority. The Pirate Republic had lasted less than a decade, but its legend would endure for centuries. Travelers who visited Nassau in the decades after described a quiet harbor town haunted by stories. Old sailors in taverns spoke of the days when men were free, when captains were elected, and plunder was shared fairly, when a common sailor could have a voice in his own destiny. But those days were gone forever. The British Empire had proven something important. Alternative ways of living, no matter how appealing to those who practiced them, could not be tolerated if they threatened the established order. Nassau's pirates had created a society based on democratic principles decades before such ideas would spark revolutions in America and France. They had proven that men from different races and backgrounds could work together as equals. But they had also proven that such experiments, when built on theft and violence, cannot endure. The Republic failed not because the idea was wrong, but because it existed in a world that would never accept it. Woodes Rogers remained governor of the Bahamas for years, slowly transforming Nassau into a profitable colony. He died in Nassau in 1732, having succeeded in his mission to civilize the pirate haven. Benjamin Hornigold, who had turned pirate hunter to save his own life, drowned in a hurricane in 1919. The irony was not lost on anyone. A man who survived years of piracy died as a servant of the crown. Nassau still exists today, the capital of the Bahamas. Its harbor still welcomes ships, though now they are cruise liners carrying tourists seeking sun and sand. Fort Fincastle still stands on the hill overlooking the town. Streets bear the names of those who brought order: Woodes Rogers Walk, George Street. But nowhere in modern Nassau will you find a monument to Vane or Blackbeard, no memorial to the brief republic that challenged an empire. Perhaps that's fitting. History is written by the victors, and the British Empire certainly won. They crushed the pirate republic, restored order, and ensured that Caribbean trade flowed smoothly to London. But they could not destroy the idea that Nassau represented. The idea that common men deserve a voice, that authority should be earned, not inherited, that men should be judged by their actions, not their birth. Those ideas would survive. They would resurface in revolutionary movements, in democratic reforms, in every struggle against tyranny. Nassau's pirates didn't know they were part of something larger. They were simply men trying to survive, to prosper, to live free from the brutal hierarchies that had oppressed them. But for a few brief years, on a small island in the Bahamas, they created something extraordinary. A republic of outlaws, a democracy of thieves, a place where the empire's power ended and human freedom began. It could not last, perhaps it was never meant to, but the fact that it existed at all, that 1,000 desperate men built something resembling democracy in the age of absolute kings, remains one of history's most remarkable chapters. Nassau fell. The pirates died or surrendered or faded into obscurity. But the dream of Nassau, the possibility it represented, could never be entirely destroyed. And that, perhaps, is why the British Empire needed to crush it so completely. Not because of the ships they stole or the trade they disrupted, but because of the question they posed simply by existing. If common men could govern themselves on a beach in the Bahamas, what else might be possible? That was a question the empire could not allow to be answered. And so Nassau burned, just as Port Royal had sunk before it. The age of Caribbean piracy ended. Order was restored. But in taverns and in stories, in songs and in legends, the pirate republic lived on. A reminder of what might have been. A glimpse of freedom that once seen could never be entirely forgotten.